This is day 5 of 20 Days of Learning with Illustrator. We're going to talk about combining objects. Before we start, I want to mention that this video does not follow my standard rules for this series. I'm not going to be showing you examples of how these features can be used in real-life examples. That's because the features used in today's videos are a lot less about visual effects and more about your workflow. We're going to talk about 3 ways to combine objects: compound paths, compound shapes, and grouping. The reason there's different methods to combine objects is because certain functions within Illustrator might work differently with, say, grouping than they might with a compound path. The other reason you want to know these different methods is because different designers will use different methods. If you're collaborating with another designer and you open up their file, you want to make sure you're familiar with how they've combined their objects so that you can interact with their objects more easily. The other thing I should mention is how important the layers panel is going to be in this video. As I walk through these exercises, the visuals of these objects may not change that much. However, the function and how these work within Illustrator will change based upon the method I use. By watching the layer panel, you'll get a better idea of which function is being used, and you'll be able to identify which method was used in your own documents. Let's get started with compound paths. If I select all these objects and hit Ctrl+8, it's going to create a compound path with these objects. What that means is that when I expand this layer, all of those paths are combined into a single object. Notice how depending on where the paths overlap, you might see holes appear in various parts of my object, or in other cases, you may not. Where the holes appear within my object depends on the calculation method that's being used. You can change how this calculation is made by opening up the window Attributes, selecting different paths within your compound path, and then changing these settings within that path. You can also select the compound path as a whole and then change the calculation method used altogether using this toggle. Knowing which option to select when you first get started may be a little bit tricky, so I recommend just opening up this attributes panel and playing with the features. The more you use it, the more familiar you get with the functions, and you might be able to predict more easily what Illustrator will do with your paths. After I'm done working with my path, or for whatever reason I want to break up my compound path, I can select the object, come up to Object, select Compound Path, and Release. Now my objects will return to their original paths. However, they won't apply the appearance and properties that existed previously. Now let's take a look at compound shapes. Compound shapes function very much like the compound paths. The difference is I'll be able to manipulate the individual paths within my shapes once I've created my compound shape. If I highlight all my objects to create a compound shape, I'm going to use the Pathfinder tool over here with the different shape modes. Notice if I hover over these modes, it's going to tell me I can use these shape modes, but to create a compound shape, I need to hold Alt while I click. So let's go ahead and do that with this method. I hold Alt, click, and now I have a compound shape. One of the major differences here between a compound path and a compound shape is when I open this up in the layers panel, I can see my compound shape. I can open it up further and actually see the various paths within my shape. I can use my direct selection tool to select an individual shape within my path and manipulate it even after my compound shape has been created. One of the major pitfalls of a compound shape is I can't break this out into the individual shapes. I really tried. I looked all over online and I couldn't find any details on how to do this. So if you figure it out, please let me know. With that said, I can select the individual objects within a compound shape, copy, and then paste those outside of my compound shape, and I will still get that original shape. I even get the original appearance properties that existed before I created the compound shape. Finally, the last method that we're going to talk about is grouping. Let's collapse these layers, make it a little easier to see. We'll click on Group, make that visible, and we're starting with the same objects. With grouping, all I need to do is select all my objects, hold Control, hit G, and now my objects have been grouped together. If I open up the layer, you can see I have a group listed here. If I open up that group, I can see the individual objects within the group. The big difference with grouping over compound paths or shapes is that my objects actually still retain their individuality. I can even access a tool called Isolation Mode by double-clicking on my object. Now I'm inside my group. I can see that up here by my breadcrumbs. Here's my layer. Here's the group that I'm in. Over on my Layers panel, I can see that I'm in Isolation Mode and I'm within a group. Within Isolation Mode, I can drill down even further by double-clicking an object. This is helpful if I want to use the Direct Selection tool to grab specific anchors. Notice I'm able to grab the mountain anchors without impacting the sun anchors at all. To leave isolation mode, I can either use the breadcrumbs right up here at the top, or I can simply click outside of the selected objects. To ungroup an object, just select that object, hold Control, hold Shift, click G, and then those objects will be returned to their original state. Those are 3 of the most common methods you can use to combine objects in Illustrator. Thanks so much. You have a fantastic rest of your day.